Hello everyone and welcome to the second session of our Dariel Conference. We are absolutely delighted to have you here with us. Today's session is the second session in a series of talks centered around Dariel and our values and what we've learned over the last 20 years. They span everything from magic and personal growth to technology and digital advancements and pretty much everything else in between. These talks are focused around sharing our knowledge and really just having an engagement with our community, and we are thrilled to have you here. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome and thank our speakers. So today, Yadhir is going to be sharing with us on magic as a tool for practical communication, and Jacques Burger will be sharing with us on innovation in a digital age. Today's talks are going to be fun and engaging, and unfortunately, it seems that our chat functionality has disappeared between Monday and today, but if you do have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we will answer them verbally after each talk. If there are further questions, you are welcome to also comment in our LinkedIn box and we will take care of those. And should you need to, and you're not able to stay for the whole time, we will also be sharing this on YouTube and you are welcome to follow us there. We will be engaging with our community as much as possible in all these platforms. So if you haven't done so, please take a look at our LinkedIn page, our YouTube page, and our Instagram, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for choosing to spend your lunch hour with us. We cannot wait to see how this goes. And without further ado, thank you so much for your time and welcome, Yadhir.
Hello everybody, my name is Yadhir Maharaj, and for the next couple of minutes I get to be the man in charge. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Aneen for setting up this, and thank you for Dariel for allowing me to participate. We are going to be going on an adventure today. We're going to take you on a journey as we explore how the art of magic can be used as a tool for developing communication skills. Firstly, do you believe in magic? What is magic? Does it require using a wand? Or does it require making something disappear? Well, whatever magic means to you, that's special to you. However, let me share with you what magic means to me. I am currently up in Joburg and it's very, very hot. Luckily, I brought along my wonderful jug filled with nice, smooth water. It's a very little bit. Anyway, I started my journey with magic at a wonderful non-profit organization called the College of Magic. They are based in Cape Town, Claremont, and I joined them when I was 10 years old. And at the time, we were taught how to perform simple magic effects, which I, as a 10-year-old, found very, very cool to show my friends and my family. However, I didn't realize how many other skills I was indirectly learning whilst learning the art of magic. For example, I learned what misdirection is. Now, I'm sure many of you have your own opinions about what misdirection is, but as a magician, I consider misdirection actually to be the redirection of attention. Right? Isn't that misdirection where I guide you on where I would like you to look? To prove how misdirection works, I want you to have a look at this box over here. I have a wonderful empty black box, and your job is to keep your eyes burning on this box. And let's see if I could perhaps misdirect you or redirect your attention. The sun is coming out even more. Pour some more water. Oh, no, I just gets empty all the time. Anyway, another thing that I learned through the art of magic was that it's very, very important to reflect. Often when we are working, or as a developer myself, I often get stuck with a task, and perhaps the task may take longer than I expected to complete. And after the task is complete, it's always a very good idea to reflect, to look back in time as to how I would approach that task differently in the future. To demonstrate this, I brought along my wonderful piece of rope. This rope is going to be our timeline, okay? And we have to reflect back in time. So let's go ahead and cut back to a certain location in time. I will go ahead and cut the rope in half. Whew, the scissor is not very sharp. Oh, we'll have to sort that out later. Anyway, we have cut to a certain moment in time. And now, once we have completed our task, we will be needing to reflect on the past. And by reflecting on the past, I mean actually reflecting back in time, back to when the rope was actually one long piece. This is the power of reflection, because you can always improve on your skills. Let's take another example. Let's make the circle of time. So I'll tie a little loop here. I have a wonderful loop. And let's go ahead and cut back in time again. Now, my scissor wasn't so sharp last time. Fortunately, I brought along these guys. You know what these are? These are magic scissor fingers. Have a look. They can literally chop through. Oh, much better than the other scissors. In magic, there are actually effects which are very, very dangerous. And I advise you not to try those effects at home. For example, we have an effect called penetration through the neck. For those of you who never saw it, watch once more, and these are not advised to do at home. Whilst performing magic, a magician often gets thirsty. Hence, from my experience, I always found it useful bringing my jug. Still too little water, we'll give it some more time. At the College of Magic, it's not only the art of magic that is taught to young individuals. I am currently a teacher at the College of Magic, and I volunteer my time every Saturday to teach young individuals and empower them and build their self-esteem through using the art of magic. At the College of Magic, we also learn another art form. And that art is the art of juggling. And again, when I was young, I thought I was just learning a cool skill of juggling. However, little did I realize that I was actually learning a metaphor for learning, right? When you're juggling, or when you are learning to juggle, you will often drop a ball on the floor. And you would have to pick up that ball and continue. And this will happen over and over again. And I can say from a developer, and I'm sure the other devs will agree with me, often we run into a bug again and again and again, and we have to persevere in order to grow. Now, I have a very interesting philosophy about juggling. I actually don't think it's important how many. I'm joking. Have a look at this. 2 balls in one hand. No, it's not a difficult trick. However, a really good juggler could do this and even look away. Too bad I'm not a good juggler. Now, for the really cool part. You would like to learn how to juggle. Well, let me show you. What you'll have to do is you'll start by juggling 2 balls and have a look at how I add the 3rd ball into the pattern. Oh, this is actually cheating. I'm actually just juggling 2 balls and I'm faking the other ball. So let's get a little bit more serious. There we go. I guess I should do a little fancy juggling tricks in case there are any jugglers at home, so they can see that I am quite serious. I love the art of juggling. You might be wondering why I threw that ball over there. So am I. However, juggling is the perfect metaphor for saying that success is full of failures. Often when we are a developer, we are looking at many files, or as a project manager, you are working with many projects. And sometimes you drop the ball. And that happens with a highly polished act. We have to simply persevere, pick up the ball and continue. And by doing this, by persevering, we will definitely be getting better and better and better. And eventually, we will progress in our careers to more advanced skills. However, you will still fail. And that's the idea of perseverance. I enjoy the art of juggling. I find it very close to coding. Let's go ahead and see if we have some more water. Now jug. Oh, we're going to need a little bit more. Juggling is a very, very cool art. However, I wonder if you perhaps realized that I, whilst juggling, actually took something out of my pocket and placed it in the box. Have you been watching the box? Well, if you have, you might have seen that I actually placed a ball in here. And that is the art of misdirection. Now, many of you may want to rewind this video to have a look at how I actually placed the ball in, and I'm sure you'll be quite surprised. Along with magic, another skill that I learned through performing the art of magic and teaching magic is a very, very vital skill that I think applies to any industry, and that is teamwork and the idea of having patience when one communicates. Often, perhaps you are a senior dev and you have to share your knowledge with the other individuals in your team. This may take patience, and to demonstrate this, I've brought along my three little objects over here, and I've also brought along my cups. Now, let's pretend we are explaining something to one of our team members. We are very happy at first. We say, okay, look here, sir or ma'am, whoever you are explaining to, I'll take the ball and place it on the cup, and I will cover the ball with the other cup. Logically, the ball should still be there. However, sometimes a miscommunication happens and the ball actually appears somewhere you didn't expect it to. Now, this may cause confusion, and what one has to remember is to have patience and maybe try and explain it in another way. So let's do it again. I'll cover the ball, place the ball on top of the cup, cover the ball again, and let's give it a tap with the magic wand. Logically, the ball should be on top of the cup. However, through miscommunication, it could end up somewhere we never expected. Now we get really, really confused. So we try another tactic. What is that tactic? We place not one cup, but two cups. Okay, then the ball, and then the cup. Let's give it another tap with our magic wand. Logically, the ball should be under the cup. However, through miscommunication, which often happens, we see the ball is not there. We have a look again. Oh, and all three balls have landed under the cup, and we are back where we started, right at the beginning. Now, this may be very, very frustrating when you are trying to explain a concept. However, please remember to have that patience. So perhaps you may want to try a more personal tactic where you might want to take the ball, give it a little squeeze, and give it a little tap. So now you have the ball. However, through miscommunication again, the ball vanishes. And when we have a look for the ball, we see, oh, where's my ball? I can't seem to find the ball. Ooh. Well, with a little bit of patience, we will finally be able to find our ball or solve our problem. Let's give it another tap. There is our ball. And this is the example which I'd like to share with you, or why I'm sharing this with you, is because this example demonstrates that one needs to have patience when communicating or conveying an idea to another individual. Whew, I am really starting to sweat after that juggling event. So let's go ahead and pour some more water in here. Ah, that looks like it might be enough. Another idea when communicating, which I've learned, is to actually be very creative. Okay, Magic taught me to be very creative. I actually found a newspaper when I came up to Joburg. I'm originally from Cape Town. I found a newspaper. And the newspaper was a pick and pay newspaper. Various items, wonderful items over here. Ooh, they have wonderful liquids. I think I might be craving some liquid for this hot day. However, I do not want to go to the shop and buy one right now. I'm giving a speech. So what can I do? How can I be innovative? We know that the next speech will be about innovation. And perhaps I can share a little bit of an idea of how magic has taught me to become creative and innovative. Have a look. To be creative, you have to think outside of the box. And please, ladies and gentlemen, do try this at home. I'd like to see all the wet carpets. A very strange idea, pouring water into newspaper. However, when we think outside of the box, using creativity, nothing should be strange. As you can see, the water, or the newspaper rather, is very good at soaking up our water. You might be wondering where the water is. Well, to be honest, so am I. Now, during my little talk over here, I have been saying that I am very thirsty, and I've been thirsty since the beginning of our speech. And to be quite honest, it wasn't water that I was craving, but in actual fact, it was a little bit of wine. Now, for those of you at home, don't be jealous. That tastes delicious. These are just simple ideas in which I've learned through the art of magic. These are the small soft skills that I was taught. There were various self-esteem and self-image that was grown in myself through the art of magic. And that is the reason why I teach at the College of Magic. Because by using magic, we can teach all these soft skills. For example, let's say I need to bring a volunteer up on stage. I have two options. I can say, hey, you, sir, and I can point at the volunteer, or I can gesture at the volunteer, which is more soft, more gentle. And these skills you can use anywhere. Students from the College of Magic, they grow up to take on wonderful careers. Not all of them are magicians. However, they use those skills in any industry they go in. Imagine presenting. Most people use PowerPoint slides. Why not try a little bit of magic? Why not use some body language? Why not use some vocal expressions? Engage your audience. There are small secret weapons that we learn as magicians through the art of magic. So, to recap, that's my favorite line. To recap, the art of magic has taught me many soft skills. Those being persevering through the art of juggling, patience when we are communicating, and people skills and how to manage people when we are working with people. and working in a team. I'd like to thank Dariel and I'd like to thank Anin again for this wonderful opportunity. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you at home for watching me and sharing this experience with me. And with that being said, thank you everybody. Anin, I shall be handing back over to yourself.
Okay, let's see if I can say myself. Thank you so much, Yadhir. That was wonderful. I think my favorite quote throughout the entire session is saying that success is full of failures, and that is such a beautiful turn of phrase to take with us. And I hope that our audience also enjoyed. Please feel free to leave us a comment in our LinkedIn box. If you've got a question, just go into the event or pop us a message in Teams. Unfortunately, our chat functionality for some reason is problematic today. But that being said, fantastic job, Yadhir. I think I speak for myself and for the team. You did a great job, and thank you so much. So now for one of my other really favorite talks, I'm going to hand over to our very own Jacques Burger, who's going to share about innovation and how you actually innovate in a digital age. We do apologize. Unfortunately, Jacques has a bit of a flu and he might have a little cough throughout. That being said, it's going to be fun, and thank you so much for your time, Jacques, and for coming and doing this, even though you've got the flu. We really, really appreciate your time. And without further ado, I take over and hand over to yourself.
Hey, thanks, Anin, and well done, Yadhir. Yeah, so like Anin mentioned, I'm actually booked off sick and supposed to be doing this from bed. So forgive the coughing if that does happen. My topic today is actually something that I'm really passionate about. It's about innovation, and more specifically innovation these days, in the digital age. How that leads to things like platforms, how do you actually structure your company to actually take advantage of all of these brilliant opportunities that are coming. Yeah, and so today I'm just going to talk around one specific aspect around that, and that is around the innovation itself. Whoops, is it? Just trying to get it to the next slide. There we go. Okay, yeah, so I did the typical thing, which was just go on to Google and Wikipedia and everywhere and see what they say around innovation. And it tends to have the same types of themes, so it's always about new ideas, creative thoughts, new imaginations, the application of something old, but in a better way. Finding more effective ways to use existing things in order to make a difference. Sorry. Yeah, and then also just in terms of when it comes to innovation, it tends to be that invention is thinking up the change, and innovation tends to be more practical, so it tends to be more about applying for a greater good. And a lot of innovation actually manifests itself via engineering. Specifically when the problem that's being solved is more of a technical or a scientific nature. Okay, so if you think about ideas in the same way that you think about farming, then what you really want to do is you want to say, okay, so what is the things that I need to put in place to give my ideas the best opportunity to grow and to become something worth having? There's a couple of things that I've identified so far, and basically to create that that fertile ground. The very first step is just be aware of what's happening around you. That translates to trends and changes in the industry, changes in the country, technology, etc. Basically have a look at what's changing and be aware of where the sentiment is going all the time. And then consciously think about what are the opportunities that can be that gets presented by these changes. Once you know what these opportunities are, it's not enough. What you actually need to do is you need to actually go and think about the what those opportunities represent and curate them. And curation basically comes down to identifying a whole bunch of bets, so it could be short-term things which won't make a huge difference, but which will lead to better, or it could be a really long shot, like Elon Musk deciding that, he's seen a trend that politicians aren't motivated enough to do something about global warming. So he thinks the world is going to come to an end, which is pretty grim. But instead of just sitting there and doing that, he also saw this as an opportunity to start SpaceX and see if he can't actually generate a transport system between us and Mars. And that was a pretty big long shot that he actually created in terms of that. And then as things started to get better, it's now created new opportunities, things like his little satellite internet service that he's starting up, which will eventually make it possible for everybody to have good internet speeds across the whole world, irrespective of where you are. Now, those things don't just happen by themselves. So it's not enough to just make a bet. What you actually need to do, you need to take those bets and you need to then go and figure out which bets are good bets and which bets are bad ones. And also, how do I actually move from a bet into something which is making me money? And one good way of actually doing that is via experiments. And I'll talk a little bit more around experiments in a moment as well. But basically what you try and do is you try to incrementally learn more and more about a bet up until the time where you know how to go and execute it and make something out of it, or until you know that it's not feasible and you should let it go. And the sooner you can do that, the cheaper it is to fail, and the quicker you get to that next bet. Because it's still going to take you 100 bets before you get that one which is actually going to start making you money. The last piece of this magic circle is basically the learnings. Doing the experiments, learning something from that, moving on to the next experiment and the bets is not good enough if nobody learns from this, and if somebody else can't actually benefit from your learnings. So making sure that those learnings actually gets captured and put back into the cycle is very important. And what I've also found is that a lot of times the learnings that you get out of your failed experiments lead to new trends and new opportunities, which could then lead to new bets being generated. So it's really, I'd say out of all of these steps, making sure that you plow back those learnings into a reusable space is probably one of the most important things that you need to be able to create fertile ground for these new ideas. Excuse me. Okay, yeah. So basically, how's the strategy and thinking around innovation changed over the years? There's actually a few very specific things that I want to highlight. So the first thing is just that, it used to be that only the most important person had the right to innovate or had the right to an opinion that could cost the company multiple millions of rands. That important person would rely on the intuition of smart people. So he would have one or two or three very smart people employed to help build out these ideas that he's been having. And the actual end results tends to be very expensive, and it tends to be very slow to actually go and test those ideas. And most important thing is actually around the focus. So it used to be that the focus was around finding the right solution and avoiding failure at all costs, because once you've failed, apparently you're no good anymore. Yeah, and then the other focus was on just having a finished product. So how things have changed in the worlds of Facebook and Tesla and all the rest of them is that the decisions are no longer made by people. They tend to be based on testing and validation. So you're starting to get to this world where the numbers help drive your decisions as long as you're looking at the right numbers. With things like cloud, etc., it's become really cheap to go and build these solutions, iterate them, and deploy them. And then with the changes in the way that we actually build software and products, it's become much easier to actually start harvesting metrics from all of these things as well, which would then guide our next layer of decisions. The other thing is that if you're someone like an Amazon, then experimentation is built into the company culture, and it becomes something which is conducted constantly. So everything that you do is an experiment, and everything that you do is a learning opportunity. And then the big change in terms of that innovation challenge is that it's no longer about finding the right solution. It's about solving the right problem. And what I love about that, is that suddenly you're not pushed into a very specific direction because of the way that the challenge has been scripted. Understanding your customer and that whole focus around kind of customer-centric, etc., has helped us to appreciate what is the problems that our customers are facing that's actually worth solving, and then trying to find a solution for that. And it might actually lead us completely outside of our comfort zone, because the things that we think are the right solutions aren't necessarily the things that solve the right problems. Then the other thing that's become a trend as well is just that we need to learn early from our failures, and this is something that you start seeing a lot. If you look at something like even Google Glass, where they iterated quickly, they tried to launch, they were trying to learn fast and change, and eventually what actually happened is that they realized that because of all the hype around Google Glass, it was impossible to actually get this done. But they managed to learn that early enough to limit the blast radius of what needed to happen. It did put them back a few years, but they've already resurfaced, and they're now focusing more on the corporate environment than the public for their things. And then, of course, the last thing is that the focus is no longer around finished products. It's now actually around the MVP. So what is the next piece of value that I'm going to be providing to my customers? Okay, so innovation is important, but who gets to innovate? And the maturity of your innovation process tells you, will determine where you are on this set of circles. In low maturity organizations, the highest paid person tends to be the guy who innovates, and it's only that person who gets to innovate. What will then start to happen is that as innovation and its worth is seen and the company grows, you might extend that to a few dedicated teams, and this is where you start seeing R&D departments. Now, where places like Amazon, etc., start to flourish is that they've actually opened up innovation to all of their employees. So, everybody, irrespective of whether you're the tea lady or one of the vice presidents, has the opportunity to come up with ideas and actually do something with that. And places like Google actually started innovation. I can't remember what it was, like an Innovation Tuesday or something like that, where they actually have dedicated time to just go and work on your specific little project that you think may at some point add value either to the organization or to society at whole. The next challenge is actually to extend that circle even further. So how do you actually embrace your customers, bring them into your community and help them guide you in terms of where it is that your products and your company needs to go? And that tends to be a very scary barrier for most companies, to start looking to your customers and actually letting them make significant changes to how it is that you actually do business. And then the last layer of innovation is around competitors. So you guys may have heard around co-opetition and kind of like a similar value there's actually a surprising number of opportunities available out there for you to extend your innovation cycle to your competitors. Whether it's trying to come up with something which makes the industry as a whole better, or to ward off a disruptor, or maybe just to lower costs or to service your customer in a better way. There's lots of opportunities which used to be no-nos for working with your competitors to actually get things done. And you'll see that a lot of places like Microsoft and Apple, for instance, where they decide to work together on something like Office because the Microsoft Office product was better received in the business world, and the existing product from Apple less so. So they decided to work together to actually bring that to their platform, something which they would not necessarily have done a few years ago. So moral to this slide is basically just that the wider you can get this circle, the more ideas get to flow into your innovation garden, and the more ideas that actually get in there, the better the chance is of you finding that one or two things which would disrupt the world. Okay, so you might be saying, cool, but ideas are expensive. The hit rate for good ideas stay exactly the same. So you're still going to have to go through a lot of good ideas before you actually find the one idea that sticks. And that's not going to change. I haven't found any specific magic formula so far that allows you to come up with the great ideas one after each other. So basically the only thing that you can do is you can actually try and limit the cost of the bad ones. Of course, the less you spend on the bad ones, apologies, the more money you've got left to try and find one of the good ones. And there's a couple of techniques that you can actually use to limit the cost of the bad ones. And mostly it comes down to how can I identify that this is a bad idea as early as possible. And the mechanism that I've found so far that works best for me is around experimentation. So there's a couple of principles to innovation by experimentation. First, you might want to know what innovation by experimentation is. Well, it's basically iterating through a whole bunch of questions in pursuit of learning more. And as you learn more and more about this, you start to figure out what works and what does not work. And that is it. It's nothing magical. So the principles to actually keep you honest and to make sure that you get the best value out of it is these following 7. The first one is just learn early. So if you're going to be designing an experiment, try and design it so that you can have the most answers, or you can learn the most while spending the least. You want to try and get that cheapest, quickest prototype out there, and in most cases it actually does not involve writing code or doing anything like that. I found that a good old-fashioned A4 piece of paper with a couple of drawings on there could be just as good as a fully functional mobile app that's deployed to a target audience. So think about what it is that you're trying to achieve out of that experiment, and then try and find the cheapest way to actually get that done. The other thing is that you need to iterate as often as you can, because the more that you iterate through these different variations, the more you can learn, and the shorter that you can get those feedback loops, the more responsive you will be to where these questions lead you. You'll find that shortening the feedback loop is one of the key principles of Agile as well, because in the end, the longer that those feedback loops are, the more out of touch you get with your subject. The next one is something which I encounter a lot. It's you should be falling in love with the problem, not the solution. Now, most of the people tend to fall in love with the solution. I don't know if there's anyone out there that's currently working on a zombie project. It's one of those which started up as a twinkle in one of the CEO's eyes. Really thought this was going to be a good one. A team decided to go and build it. They failed miserably. The team was replaced, it then moved on to the next person, etc. To try and get this going, because the solution just looks so cool and snazzy, but it's not actually solving the problem. And that tends to be kind of like where at the heart of why these things fail. So the moment that you start falling in love with the problem, you're open to new ways of actually solving it. And you're also open to taking something which is really sexy and technically brilliant and throwing it away because it's not actually solving the heart of the problem. The next one is around getting credible feedback. So one of the interesting things that I came across is that if you want to find out whether something completely out of the box is going to work, you should not be asking a focus group, because they can't imagine a world where this new thing is actually going to be. So they would never be able to actually tell you good, credible feedback in terms of whether this is a viable option or not. At best, what you can do is you can ask them to basically to relate back based on their experiences and similar things that they've experienced in the past. So if you ask for the wrong feedback, you're going to make the wrong decisions based on that feedback. The next one is around measure what matters now. And basically what that comes down to is that there is 100 million different things that we could measure at any moment in time. But try and find 2 or 3 things that's going to tell you the most about the problem that you're trying to solve and whether you're solving it or not. And focus on those, because otherwise it's going to be too distracting. And also everybody's heard that you can prove anything with stats. So that's the other problem that you could potentially be running into. If you've got too much metrics, then you could end up proving or disproving whatever it is that you would want to prove and no longer allowing the results to guide you. But what is important is that you should not just be looking at local measures, you should also be looking at holistic measures to see whether the overall effectiveness is actually something that is good or bad. The next thing is around testing your assumptions. So just because you came up with it doesn't mean that it's right. So, let your ego sit back, take a moment, check the assumptions behind those innovations. And usually, if you can do that in a quantitative way, it's even better. But try and devise mechanisms for testing your assumptions all as you go. And you're going to actually end up having much better and more healthy experiments going along the way. The next thing is around failing smart. So the one thing around experiments is you're going to be failing a lot, and failure is not a bad thing. If you're not learning anything from it, then it's bad. And if somebody else cannot learn from your failures, then it's bad. So the typical things to ask yourself around failing smart is, did you learn something from this test? Are you going to be applying that to change your strategy? And did you share your learnings with others? And then, of course, the last one is something that I like a lot. And we should be doing this more in retrospectives as well whenever there is a failure, is did you fail as early and as cheaply as possible? So is there something that you could have done to uncover the defect earlier and maybe pivoted earlier? So that last one is definitely an important one. Yeah, so there's two types of experiments. There's divergent experiments and convergent experiments. And like open-ended and closed questions, these do a similar type of thing. So divergent experiments are similar to an open question, where you want to ask the person something like, how was your day? And you have no idea what the answers are that's going to come back from it, versus the did it rain today, which ends up being a yes or a no, and either validates or invalidates your specific statement. So divergent experiments tend to be something which you would that you would do a lot of during the early stages. Most of the time you want to explore an idea, and you want to figure out, is this something that is feasible? You might also want to chart the way forward. So you kind of have an idea that maybe there's money in gaming, but you don't actually know where in gaming the money is. You may have heard that, you can save a lot of money going cloud, but you don't know whether it's right for you or where you should be applying it. That's where these divergent experiments become very useful, because it allows you to get a feeling for the landscape and then slowly zoom in to the areas where the most value is actually to be found. Now, these divergent experiments are really useful for generating ideas. And it's also commonly used during your early innovation stages. And examples of that would be stuff like prototypes, iterative designs, and I've even done a few that started off with questionnaires, and just talking to a bunch of people in the street. Then you get the other side, which is the convergent experiments. Now, these are the things that you would usually do once you're already quite far down the road of innovation. You've gotten to the point where most of the questions are answered, and now there's only a few assumptions left that you want to still go and figure out. And that's where these types of experiments become really cool. The convergence experiments are also kind of the typical scientific method. So you'll set up an assumption, you'll get a control, and you'll do an experiment. It might involve a lot of statistics to try and get to a result, and ultimately it answers yes, your assumption is true, or no, it is not. Examples of that are things like A/B testing, where does the screen look better with a blue button or with a red button? You show it to a whole bunch of people, and the button that the people said they liked most out of the population is the one that you go with. And then there's slightly more complex versions of that as well, like the multivariate testing, which is just a different form of A/B testing. Just they have multiple variations built into this, into each of the different options, and it would be things like product baskets and things like that, where that becomes useful. Where convergent experiments are very useful is to answer very specific questions, like would this work in the 20-year-old females of African descent space? You know, you'd be able to actually go and set up an experiment to go and answer that very specific question explicitly, and then you'll get your answer at the end of this. It might not be what you want, but you would definitely get a yes or a no, and that would then guide future iterations. Excuse me. Okay, yeah, so how does a divergent experiment look? Well, there's 3 phases. There's a preparation stage, then there is the running of the experiments, and then at the end of a set of experiments, there's an action stage where you need to decide whether what you want to do next. So the preparation stage, excuse me for a moment. Okay, the preparation stage starts by just defining the problem. So this could be something like, you know, I would like to know if there is a need for another accounting package that's completely cell phone based in the South African market. You know, that might be the problem. Then you're going to set some limits, and this once again is one of the important steps, that if you don't do this right, it becomes very expensive. And specifically, you want to set a time, you want to set a budget, and you want to set a scope. And if you think about this like you think about spikes, then it's a very similar thing. You know, you're allocating 2 days to answer a very specific question using one resource, and they're looking at a very specific problem. So that would be a dev spike. And in this case, it would be a similar type of thing. I've got 1 week to come up with the answer to the following problem. And I've got this much budget available to be able to actually use it, and this is the scope of what I want to actually go and solve. And only then do you go out and pick the team. And then once you've actually got that team going, then what you do is you observe. And this typically in the beginning stages is go out and do some research, figure out what's out there in the market, what's best practices, etc. And then generate a couple of solutions based on what you've observed. Once you've got those 1 or 2 different solutions going, what you then do is you define an MVP. And this MVP is exactly the same as the MVPs that we build as part of development cycles. The biggest difference between the two is just that this is not one step towards a predefined product or application. This is a step towards answering a set of questions, which may or may not be built upon to go and answer and finally become a bigger product. Then once you've done that, so once you've built that MVP, it's time to expose it to the wild. You have to take it out and field test it, because it's no good if it stays where it is. And this is also why when we're doing development, it's important to actually get those MVPs out there to the users where they can actually go and use them, because it follows a similar process. You're going to learn more about whether it's good or bad once you expose it to the elements than you're going to do by showing it to a few select people and then moving on to the next iteration of MVPs. Okay, so now you've done the field test and you've learned a little bit about um, about how your MVP has performed. Now you have to make one of 4 decisions, and this is going to happen iteratively every single time. So the first thing is that you could have learned that you don't know enough, but you're on the right trail, in which case you would want to proceed. You could also learn that you're actually on the wrong path, but it's still a viable option, so you want to pivot. Or this could already have been, sorry, or you could have gone through a few iterations by now, and you've realized that what you actually have now is good enough to launch, in which case you want to actually go and prepare for launch. The last thing is something which I think we don't do often enough, and that is pull the plug. It's okay to pull the plug and then take that money and try and find the next idea that is actually going to be feasible. So there's a responsible way of pulling the plug, but I do believe we should be exercising that specific lever a lot more for our organizations. Okay, so assuming that we're preparing for launch, then step 9 is scaling it up. So you've built something which is good enough for your target audience, but how do you actually scale this up so that it becomes big enough for your intended market? It could be that you're planning on launching it locally to a select set of customers, or it could be that you're actually putting this out on the web as a platform to the whole world all at once. And there's various strategies for going for scaling it up, depending on exactly how risk averse you are and how easy it is to actually iterate through additional versions of this this product or service that you've come up with. And then the last step, irrespective of whether you're preparing for launch or anything else, you have to share the learnings. And this includes actually documenting those learnings and making sure that it's in some sort of a shared space where other people in the organization would also be able to benefit from it. Okay, so then convergent experiments. So convergent experiments follow more or less the same thing. You're also setting up, which is around the making sure that you know what the question is that you're actually going to be answering. So, you prepare a question statement, you figure out what the independent variables are going to be, and you define what the outcomes are going to be versus the options that you're going to take based on those outcomes. What you then do is you set up your team, and where possible, you want to actually try and run these things independently to make it as unbiased as possible. And in a lot of cases, you're actually going to require some statistical experts for this as well, since this tends to be more in the realm of quantitative data instead of qualitative data that you then have to troll through to try and figure out what's best. Good examples of that is when Spotify releases a new feature, they release the feature to a select set of customers, and then they pull metrics on how it's being used, when it's being used, whether it's popular or not, and then based on that outcome, they then decide whether they expose it to a broader audience or whether they actually take it back to the drawing board. And that's just one example of how this type of convergent experiments can be baked into your everyday process. Okay, yeah, so the next step after you've got your testers going is to randomize your test and control. You know, and this is kind of where the scientific method really starts playing a role. You want to try and make sure that this is a statistically sound experiment with the controls and the blinds and double blinds, if possible, to actually go into this. And then step 4 is around validating your sample. So making sure that the data that you've actually collected rings true, and also in terms of that whole signal to noise ratio, which is basically just how much variance is there in the system, which should be disregarded because of external factors. You know, so there's a lot of prep work that you need to do in terms of that. Then you test and analyze the results, and then based on those results, you would then go and decide on, this is my course of action. And then once again, the most important thing is you need to make sure that you share the learnings. So it's critical to capture that results, and it's important to then share it to everyone else so that you can save someone else the trouble of running into the same wall that you've run into already. Sometimes it also helps to show you the way through by showing you the different angles that has already been attempted, so that you can find the one way which has not been. Yeah. So you might be saying, cute, but does this work? And we've applied this at 3 of our customers so far. At African Bank, we've helped them a little bit around a center of excellence, just in terms of what would be needed for the foundation of a center of excellence. And out of that came the opportunity to actually start with one experimentation team, where we've looked at all kinds of things from actually, I'm not sure if I can say what we experimented on. Okay, so we experimented on a whole bunch of fun stuff. And I mean, some of the stuff was as diverse as, you know, writing games and doing things like that. You know, so it was just a way to start getting through this backlog of bets, trying to figure out what those moonshots are, and do those moonshots have any potential for becoming something real. For Johnson & Johnson, we've had some workshops with them as well, where we've identified some potential options. And what's quite nice is that they're actually moving forward on some of these ideas. Sorry, last time I checked. Yeah, and then for Better Life, we've done a similar thing, where we've done some innovation workshops with them as well, and they were really interested in a center of excellence. But then when COVID came, a lot of these types of I would almost say fun money, you know, kind of like money for taking chances, were put on hold, and a lot of these opportunities have been put on hold with that, where once we're out of the COVID economic ditch, you know, I'm hoping that all of these things will actually go and pick up again. But we've had some really good feedback from everybody so far, and some really good cooperation to take these things forward. Okay, that's actually me. I managed to get through it with less less coughing than I thought I would. I'm hoping most of you are still there. Good. Yeah, that is me. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Joe. That was very interesting, actually. I'm so sorry about the cough. And thank you so much, guys, for sticking around and watching with us. That was very interesting. I think there's some very valid points and some really interesting approaches in the ways and the different things that you can do to actually iterate and approach your projects in a little bit more of a concise manner. Thank you so much again for joining us today. As always, if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the link below. And we'll also be sharing this live very, very soon. So before we head off, we will not be hosting another event during December. Our Dariel Conference will kick off again as of January 2021. We wish you all a very happy festive season. If you are taking a break, go and have a very warm and welcome rest after 2020. We all deserve it, and we reconvene with some really interesting talks on the 13th of January 2021. A big thank you to our speakers, Yadhir and Jacques. That was really interesting and fun and informative, and we hope that you guys have enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you very soon in the next one, but for right now, thank you for your time, and we'll be releasing these on YouTube very soon, so keep an eye out for those, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you so much, and goodbye for now.